In today's video, I'm going to try and answer a question that I do receive quite regularly. The question is, what cassette Walkman would I recommend? Well, behind me here I've got quite a few different Sony models. A couple of these are my favourites, and then a couple of others I'd probably recommend avoiding, despite the fact they were some of the best models that Sony made at the time. I'll explain what that's about during the course of this video, and I'll also give you some more hints and tips on things to look out for, as well as links to other websites where you can read up a lot more on personal stereos that I can pass on to you during the course of this video. So hopefully by the end of the video, if you do want to buy a Walkman, you'll have a bit more of a clue as to what type of model you're looking for. So let's get on with it. So the first thing to point out, if you're buying a cassette Walkman now, you're not buying a new one, especially not from Sony, because they haven't sold a cassette Walkman since 2010, and the last models they sold were only available in Japan and weren't particularly exciting either. If you want a decent Walkman, you have to go back quite a few years before then. If you look on Amazon now for personal stereo, you're just going to find some horrible plastic monstrosities, which for efficiency's sake should really just go straight from the factory to recycling, missing out the customer bit in the middle to avoid a load of complaints. Now, the information I'm going to be passing on in this video, a lot of it has been picked up from websites like Walkman Archive. I would go there if I was you, if you want to look through some beautiful pictures of different models, together with proper in-depth analysis of the performance of them, comparisons between different ones, etc. I know Hugo over at Walkman Archive, so I'm quite sure he's happy to let me use a couple of his pictures in this video, and they are beautiful pictures as well. He's a photographer, as you can see, and he takes some gorgeous photos of these pieces of equipment, and it doesn't just focus on Sony. You've got Aiwa, Panasonic and Sanyo models in there. I know it's the Walkman Archive, but it's really a personal stereo archive. Now, as well as that website, I'd recommend you go over to a forum, stereotogo.org. Of course, there's lots of different sections on there, but they focus heavily on portable audio cassette devices, so you're going to get a lot of information and help on there with whatever queries you've got about Walkman. And then finally, WalkmanCentral.com. If you want to look up a specific model, you've got the model number, you want to know a little bit more information about it, there's a good chance you'll find information on there. Right, so you want to buy the best Walkman that was made. Which one do you get? Well, the WM-DD9, according to the Walkman Archive. Another very highly recommended model is the WM-DC2. So let's go on eBay and see how much those cost. Okay, well, if we start with the DD9, we can see there's one here for sale. It looks pretty much mint in box, but it is $1,700 or thereabouts. Now, that's probably one of those speculative adverts. They're just hoping someone's prepared to splash the cash. But if we look at completed sales, we can see somebody bought one for £736 plus quite a bit of postage. For my US viewers, if you add those two together, convert them into dollars, that's about $1,000. So still not cheap. Let's look at the other one, the DC2. Well, I couldn't find any of those that had sold. They seem pretty rare. The only one I found for sale was $400, and it was for parts or not working, and it does look pretty beaten up as well. So whilst those two models might be the best Walkman, I don't think they're a realistic proposition for most people. Instead, I'm going to show you some models that I think are a little bit more attainable. I've got two DD Walkmans here, a DD3 and a DD2. To me, this is what a Walkman should look like. This is what I picture in my head if I'm thinking of a Walkman. A nice metal box with a good sized window on one side to look at the cassette. A chunky little device, but not too ridiculous, not too big to fit into a pocket. We've got mechanical buttons on here rather than soft touch controls. It's just a beautiful object. These ones went for years in different varieties, the DD range, and they're recognised as some of the best models that Sony made. Unfortunately, my DD3 model is in a bit of a sorry state. There's no battery cover compartment. You can see it uses two AA's in here. There's a few loose panels and things as well. I can't really use this one. However, my DD2 model is in much better condition. The only downside to this is it's got a crack across the plastic window on there, but everything else is intact, so I can use this one. Now, the DD on the Walkman DD range stands for disk drive. It's a direct drive mechanism, which means there's no rubber belts inside, therefore nothing to perish, nothing to stretch. You should get less wow and flutter, a much more accurate speed of playback, and that's what it did mean back when they came out. But unfortunately now, DD on a Walkman means that it's going to do this. That noise you were hearing is coming from the machine itself, not over the audio output. It's actually from the mechanism. It's the DD mechanism. The centre cog has snapped, as you can see on this picture here. This is what happens. You've got a metal disc surrounded by a plastic cog, and over time the plastic cog tried to shrink a little bit, but it couldn't because of the metal, and it snapped. Now, if you go on the Stereo To Go forums, for years they've been trying to figure out ways to get around this problem because it's so common. Now, you can follow a step-by-step guide and try and repair your own using epoxy resin to fill in the hole and then paint it in black, but you really do need a heck of a lot of skill. What you're better off doing if you've got this problem, which you will have if you've got a DD Walkman, is to send it off and get it repaired by a professional. And there's links I'll put in the video description to a chap on eBay that will do that for you. However, they're also still working on the problem and trying to get around the whole thing by creating a new centre gear made out of brass, which will replace the plastic one. But again, you need to get into the machine, take it apart, put it in there. Not a job for your average amateur. So I've got to say, unfortunately, however much I like the DD range, and I really do like them, for most people it's just going to be too much hassle having to get a machine and then get it repaired as well. I should mention that there is a model in the DD range that doesn't suffer from this issue, and it's the WM-DD9 because it's got a slightly different mechanism inside. However, that's the one that they were trying to sell you for $1,700. So I think it's best we move away from the DD range now, and I'll show you a Walkman that you can get, which is the best sounding Walkman that you can possibly buy at a sensible price. And it's this one. It's the WM-D6C. Now, I say sensible price, these are not cheap, but this is the best sounding Walkman that you've got a decent chance of getting your hands on. Now, this is a professional cassette recorder designed really more as a smaller, more portable version of the TC-D5 I demonstrated to you in an earlier video. That was the recorder used by reporters and for radio broadcasts, very professional applications. And the D6 was also used for those applications. And it was on sale for about 20 years, but it's a little bit difficult calling it a Walkman given the size of the thing. It doesn't really fit in a pocket. Other than the fact it says Walkman on the lid, I don't think I'd class it in the same category as the traditional Walkman. However, it is an excellent sounding and recording device. It takes 4 AA batteries which go in this compartment here, and those batteries, they don't last for very long either. If we look in the manual here, we can see on the right hand column, alkaline batteries, continuous playback, 6 hours. That's how long you get out of 4 batteries, which isn't much at all for a Walkman. But of course, this was a device designed more for reporters and people walking around listening to their music all day. You can, of course, plug it into a 6-volt power supply, but that doesn't make it very portable. Centre negative on there, I should point out as well. And we've got line in and line out on the back, as well as a speed adjustment control. You can record over the line in or via the microphone in. You've got adjustable recording level, and you've also got a Dolby selector for Type B or Type C. It's unusual to see Type C on a Walkman, and you can select tape types 1, 2 and 4, which is better even than the TC-D5 Pro I've got, which only has Dolby B and only tape types 1, 2 and 3. And as you'd expect on a recorder, you've got a tape counter at the top here, as well as a VU meter to help you get the recording levels just right. So how much does a D6C cost? Well, I've looked on eBay today and you can get them for somewhere around about £300 to £500, which is still not cheap, of course, but it's a lot better than those models I showed you earlier on. And if you're patient, occasionally you'll see a really good deal on there. I picked this machine up about a year ago. This is my second one. It cost me about £150, but it's pretty much mint in the box. I don't think all the accessories are in there, but the player itself looks like no one's ever used it. It's completely unblemished, and an important thing that was in the box was the shoulder strap. I didn't have that before because of course you can't fit this inside a pocket, so it comes with this strap which connects to these pegs at either side, and whether you've got it in the case or not, you can then sling it over a shoulder. Now we'll circle back around to this machine in a moment when I play a cassette through it. However, we're going to move on to the next category now. These are the models, the range of models that I recommend most people take a look at. It's the WM-EX range from the Walkman's 20th anniversary or thereabouts, which is 1999. This model is the WM-EX 672, but there's quite a few different ones that are quite similar to this. You can see it's got all the features on here. We've got auto reverse, mega bass, we can track skip. It just uses one AA and it's got Dolby B noise reduction. Now you can see here we've got the buttons that are a little bit unusual looking. I'll show you how all that works in a moment. Now the AA battery is in this black plastic compartment at the bottom here. You can see you can open that and it's just a single AA, and it will run for quite a while on that. I'll show you the battery life in a moment, but we don't want that AA on there really because it makes it look ugly. But if we take it off, how does it run on any power? Well, it does use gumstick batteries, as they call them. These ones here, now they slide in this little compartment on the bottom. These are rechargeable NiCads, and it will run on one of those, not as long as a AA battery, but it's a much neater setup if you use it that way. It's got an all metal body, yet it's still very lightweight. However, it's not flimsy. It feels extremely well put together. And importantly, unlike the bulky D6C, this one will fit inside a jacket pocket. It isn't the smallest Walkman ever made, but it's considerably smaller than the D6C. The smallest one was the WM-10, but this is just a nice sensible size. If you compare it to the DD3, you see it's quite a bit thinner, a little bit shorter as well, and it does weigh quite a lot less. Now the Walkman of this era quite often came with inline remote controls, and this one's no exception. We've got a volume control on here, we've got a play and stop, we can select the tape direction for auto reverse, we can skip forward and back, and fast forward rewind, and we've got a hold button on the side here as well. Of course, the first thing that you should do if you get a Walkman, replace the little earbuds that came with it with a decent set of headphones. That's the simplest way to improve the quality of sound from any personal stereo. Now, the use of an inline remote control on this particular model is entirely optional. You don't have to use it. You can plug your headphones straight into the top of there in that 3.5mm jack, and you can control it using the buttons on the device itself. But it does make more sense to plug it into this extension lead, and then you've got the controls easier to access. Now, I'm going to demonstrate these machines with a new cassette that I've recently been sent by Anders Enger Jensen. If you want more information on this, the web address is at the bottom of the screen there. Anders has provided me with some music that I've used before in previous videos, which won't hit a YouTube copyright flag. This is a ferric tape and it doesn't have any kind of noise reduction on it. So I'm going to do some demonstrations with this later on, but first let me just show you how this machine works. The buttons on the machine are all soft touch electronic controls, so the top right one, that's play, the one to its left, that's stop. If we hit the play button again, it reverses the direction of the tape and plays the tracks on the opposite side, and then below there we've got a rewind and fast forward key. If we hold those down, that activates fast forward or rewind if we were to hold the other one. However, if we want to skip a track, we just tap the button and it will jump to the next gap on the tape, which will find the start of the next track. Holding down the function key activates the battery test, but holding it down in conjunction with other buttons activates other features. This one turns the Dolby B noise reduction on and off. This one at the bottom here, that's the auto volume level system or something, which you can turn on or off. The one to its right is the blank skip, which is a handy feature to skip past the empty part at the end of a tape or any blank sections. And then this is the mega bass and various other sound options. The inline remote gives you access to a number of these controls. You've got play and stop. If you hold down the play key, it will reverse the tape and play the opposite side. You can also skip tracks forward and back, as well as rewind and fast forward. Now, over the years, Sony managed to significantly improve the battery life on their Walkman range. This 20th anniversary edition came out in 1999 and promises 50 hours of battery life, and that's based on the two batteries being added together. So we've got the gumstick battery, which gets 12 hours on its own, a AA alkaline, which gets 39. Add them together, for some reason you lose an hour, but you get 50 hours. I'd prefer just to use the gumstick on its own. It just makes the thing a lot neater. Now, this particular Walkman was supplied with one gumstick battery as well as the charger to charge it up in. Now, these gumstick batteries that were inside the box by now are starting to get a little bit long in the tooth and are unlikely to hold a full charge. But it's nothing to be concerned about because there are still people making this particular style of battery, and they don't cost much either. So it's worth stocking up on a few of them. And if you happen to have the batteries but don't happen to have the charger, quite often those chargers will also appear on eBay as well, so it's not really a big issue, and it's much better running one of these things off a gumstick battery than having that AA battery hanging off the bottom. However, if you do want to use a AA battery and you were to buy a machine that should have the battery holder included, but for whatever reason it isn't in the box, it's not too difficult to find a replacement. I've got 3 different models here. You can see they've got slightly different designs on the base of them. However, the connectors and the screw and the dimensions are all the same, so you can interchange them between different models. One of these is off a mini disc, but I can put it on the bottom of a cassette Walkman and it works just as well. So that was the WM-EX672, but I've also got an EX678 I can show you. This one is brand new in box. I haven't opened it before. Very similar model, 20th anniversary, 50-hour battery life, but this one comes with an LCD inline remote. So we'll just have a quick look inside here. So buying this as new, this is what it would look like. You get a little pouch inside here to carry the Walkman around in your pocket, stop it getting scratched. Instructions in various different languages. We've got the battery holder, and then below that, that's where the Walkman hides inside its little plastic bag. Now I'll just remove that. I think someone's probably been in here before to test it because the things on the left would have been wrapped up a bit differently to this, but we've got the headphones, we've got the inline remote control there. Also got the gumstick battery, and this time we've got a charger which fits into a Euro plug socket. Now, this is such a similar model to the previous one, you may be wondering why I'm taking the time to show it to you. And there is a reason, and it revolves around this LCD inline remote. So I'll just put a battery in here so I can demonstrate. I've got one charged for one of the other devices that are interchangeable, of course, and I'll put the cassette in that I used before. And if we look at the buttons on this, you'll see that there are less buttons on the machine itself. We don't have as many options. We can't get into those additional settings. Those are all shifted over to the remote. You press the menu button and that enables you to access them using this dial on the side which goes up and down, and you can press it in to select things. That's for your mega bass, your Dolby noise reduction, all those kind of things. They're all on the remote control. They're not on the machine itself. So if you happen to buy one of these and it doesn't come with the remote, you can still use it with your headphones. However, you won't have access to those additional controls that are only accessible by the remote control. But you'd still be in a better position than you would be if you bought this model and you didn't have the remote. This is the WM-EX 900. They've upped the battery life on this one to 78 hours, and it's got a backlit LCD remote control. However, that remote control is essential because if you look at the machine, all you've got on here is a hold control. That's it. That's the only button the machine has on it itself. The other ones have all been shifted over to that remote control, so without the remote control you can't even play a tape in this one. Now, just like the other inline remote controls, you can plug your own headphones into this, so there's no issue there. However, I do find this remote control more irritating to use than the previous ones because of the number of buttons on it. Because they've shifted all the controls onto it, we've got buttons on the top and the bottom. So you might be wanting to turn your Dolby noise reduction on and off and you accidentally press fast forward on the top. It's just too many buttons in too small a space. Now, you might be wondering why it says PL1Y. That should say play. It's just the LCD display is a little bit corrupted on this one. You might be thinking, well, if I bought this machine without the remote control, perhaps I could use one off another device. So I plugged the remote in off the previous one, and all it will display is menu. It won't let you play any tapes or do anything else, so the remotes are not compatible with one another. So all I'm trying to say here is if you do buy an old Walkman, which should come with an inline remote control, make sure that it's included. And now at long last it's time for a bit of a sound test, so let's compare the different machines that I've got here. that was an extremely unscientific test, but at the end of it you're listening to a streamed digital file over the internet, I'm listening to an analog device. What sounds best at my end? Well, it's the WM-D6C, as you'd expect it would. It's got less background hiss and the music has more body, more richness to it than the other devices. It's not night and day, but it's definitely better than the others. Now, there were a couple of different models of the D6C over the almost 20 years it was out. The earlier ones are said to be better. I think this is one of the later ones and it sounds great to me, so don't worry too much about that. However, please don't let that put you off the other devices I've shown you here. If I was scoring that D6C on a scale of 1 to 5 as a 5, these other devices I'd score as a 4.5 out of 5. The only one I couldn't test was the DD3 because it doesn't really work properly. Back in the 1980s and 90s, I was using a personal stereo cassette player made by Iowa. I couldn't afford any of these Sony models. It's only in recent years, the last 10 years or so, that I've picked up these Walkman, and it's down to the help of websites like the Walkman Archive that have pointed me in the right direction towards the models that are worth concentrating on. And from here I can now pass on my limited knowledge and say which models are not worth concentrating on, which ones you might want to avoid despite them originally being very good, and also which ones you might want to pay a little bit more attention to. So if you are in the market for an old cassette Walkman, I hope this video has been of use and perhaps narrowed down your selection a little bit. There are of course a lot of different models out there, so it's very much down to personal preference as to which model you get. There are quite a few people out there quite prepared to carry around a big heavy object like this with its relatively short battery life to get the best possible sound quality. But I've got to say I'm not one of those. As much as I like this one, it tends to stay in the house. If I do want to take a Walkman with me when I go out, it's much more likely to be an object like this with its really long battery life, its slim lightweight design. But I'm not the expert on Walkman, personal stereos even. If you do want to know more about them, I've got links to various websites in the video description who can give you a lot more information on these than I can, especially in the forums on there. But if you're interested in buying the D6C or one of these EX models, I'll put some links in the video description to eBay which might point you in the general direction of the model that you're looking for. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
Who the heck is asking this guy what Walkman to buy?
Well, perhaps they're people who want to buy a Walkman but don't know which one to get.
I think he makes this stuff up. I mean, who wants to play cassettes nowadays?
Maybe it's someone who has some cassettes that they want to listen to.
You make a good point. But the last person to use a Walkman, unironically, was Marty McFly.
He didn't use a Walkman.
Yes, he did. In the first Back to the Future film.
No, he didn't. He used an Iowa HSP-02 Mark II.
Well, it was still a Walkman.
No, it's a personal stereo. Walkmans were made by Sony.
Oh, touche.
Clearly you still have much to learn about the ancient art of pedancy, my young apprentice.
Actually, I think you'll find it's pedantry.
But clearly you're a quick learner.